Number 12. Melanie May. After ending his on and off again relationship with 19-year-old Melanie May in 2022, Jack McMahon received a tip that she was at his property, so he left work early and arrived at his home in Cheshire, England to find Melanie loitering on his doorstep with a male acquaintance. She then warned Jack that her relatives from London were on their way before fleeing the scene with his passport and a few other stolen items, including a pack of wrenches and a small amount of cash. Melanie proceeded to call Jack multiple times, bragging about the theft and saying, "Hope you like apples." She'd apparently stuffed apples into the exhaust pipe of his vehicle and painted disparaging insults on the fence surrounding his yard. For the next 4 days, Melanie continued to harass her ex. Police eventually arrested Melanie and the man she was seen outside with at Jack's house. The court heard about how she and Jack had met through a dating app. They'd only known each other for 3 weeks and had been intimate with one another when Jack decided he didn't want to pursue a relationship and broke things off. He ended a fling while Melanie was at his house and asked her to leave, but ultimately agreed to let her stay the night. They argued the next morning before Jack went to work, and Melanie threatened him before they both left. Later that day, Jack received a tip that prompted him to come home and discover the property damage, along with his scorned lover. Melanie ultimately pleaded guilty to 4 counts of criminal damage, 3 counts of theft, and 1 count of harassment without violence. By the time she faced the music in court, she was pregnant with another man's baby and had apparently moved on from her frustration with Jack. She managed to avoid jail time in the end, but was slapped with a small fine and an 18-month community order, which required her to attend a 25-hour rehabilitation program. Number 11. Elizabeth James. When the ex-boyfriend of Elizabeth James left her in 2018, he left his bull mastiff named Champ behind in Lawrence, South Carolina. At some point after the breakup, a passerby contacted animal control with concerns about Champ's well-being after seeing him chained up outside in an obvious state of suffering. Authorities arrived at the woman's house to find Champ emaciated and on death's doorstep. They arrested Elizabeth on suspicion of animal abuse and hauled her off to jail while an animal rescue organization worked to save Champ's life. At just 50 pounds, 23 kilograms, the dog was less than half the weight of a healthy mastiff his age. He was also suffering from bookworms, which Elizabeth's defense lawyer blamed on Champ's skeletal condition. Her attorney argued that Elizabeth was a struggling single mom who already had a child to shelter and feed, and that she didn't know what to do when Champ got sick. Prosecutors argued, however, that there was clear and convincing evidence that Champ had been deliberately starved, and accused Elizabeth of neglecting the dog out of anger toward her ex-boyfriend. They also pointed out how she managed to feed her other dog, who appeared to be healthy, indicating that she could have also made an effort to care for Champ. A jury acquitted Elizabeth of a felony animal torture charge and instead convicted her of misdemeanor ill-treatment of animals. She received a maximum sentence of 90 days in jail and a $1,000 fine. Many were outraged at what seemed like a slap on the wrist against a convicted animal abuser, but unfortunately, the court system doesn't always err on the side of favoring public opinion. Number 10. BERLINAH WALLACE. Former fashion student BERLINAH WALLACE was overcome by uncontrollable rage when she found out in 2015 that her ex-boyfriend, 29-year-old Mark Van Dongen, was dating a new woman. She began harassing and slandering him, claiming he was abusive during their time together. She also intimidated him to the point where he became afraid for his safety. But Wallace took things to a whole new level of depravity when she went to Van Dongen's home in Bristol, England during the early morning hours one day and doused him with sulfuric acid as he lay in bed. Van Dongen was left paralyzed, severely disfigured, and in excruciating pain. He spent 4 months in a coma on a ventilator and a year in the hospital, during which time he lost a leg and most of his eyesight, and more than a quarter of his body was covered in burns. When his father showed up at the hospital, he looked in the room and thought the staff had made a mistake. The damage to Van Dongen's face and body was so severe that he was unrecognizable. When he regained consciousness and saw the extent of his injuries, he begged the people around him to just end his life. The physical and emotional pain eventually became so unbearable that it led to Van Dongen's death 15 months after the attack. Before passing away, he told investigators that Wallace told him, "If I can't have you, no one can." Wallace denied purposely attacking her ex with acid. She said that she meant to splash him with water during a heated argument and that she didn't know that there was acid mixed in with it. Prosecutors pointed out how Wallace had researched the effects of sulfuric acid online shortly before the incident and had looked at images of burn victims, so she clearly had a good idea of what to expect when she poured it on her former lover. Not surprisingly, the court didn't buy Wallace's story. She was acquitted of murder, but convicted of throwing a corrosive substance with intent. After considering the particularly sadistic nature of the attack and the fact that it was premeditated, the court sentenced Wallace to life in prison with a minimum of 12 years. Number 9. Samantha Weiner. Early one morning in September 2022, Roman Gerald Stewart Jr. fatally shot a 20-year-old intruder named Ezekiel Trey Archuleta at his home in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. Shortly thereafter, police responded to a call about shots fired to find Archuleta dead in Stewart's front yard with multiple gunshot wounds. Authorities ruled the shooting as a justified case of self-defense based on Florida's Stand Your Ground law. During the investigation, they uncovered evidence that Archuleta committed the home invasion at the behest of Stewart's ex-girlfriend, 18-year-old Samantha Weiner. The woman allegedly solicited Archuleta to carry out the botched robbery as part of a revenge plot following their breakup. Weiner was also accused of asking several people to do the robbery before getting Archuleta to commit to the deed. According to police, Weiner briefed Archuleta on who lived in the home, how and where to get inside, and what types of valuables to potentially look for and take during the robbery. Although Weiner didn't pull the trigger and the shooting was deemed justified, she was charged with second-degree murder based on the belief that Archuleta wouldn't have died if she hadn't masterminded the crime he was trying to commit. She was also charged with solicitation to commit robbery. In the end, Stewart was charged with multiple drug and gun-related counts. Number 8. Courtney Ireland Ainsworth. Louis Jolly's life was torn apart after he broke up with 20-year-old Courtney Ireland Ainsworth in 2019. As far as he knew, the former couple had parted ways on fairly peaceful terms, and all he wanted was to move on with his life. But when Ireland Ainsworth began seeing a new man, Jolly started getting arrested over and over for allegedly harassing and stalking his ex. For a 6-month period lasting from July to December 2020, Ireland Ainsworth repeatedly went to the police in Liverpool with complaints against Jolly. She provided investigators with evidence from social media of his alleged crimes, and on one occasion, her mother called the police and accused Jolly of threatening to stab her. Jolly was taken into custody 6 times, spent upwards of 80 hours behind bars, was charged with assault and stalking, and had an order of protection taken out against him in Ireland Ainsworth's favor. He lost his job amid the legal turmoil and was required to wear an electronic monitoring device and adhere to a strict curfew. Even after the order of protection went into effect, the allegations against Jolly continued. Ireland Ainsworth and her mother accused him of breaching the order, but by that point detectives had started to dive deeper into the case. They connected at least 17 Instagram accounts linked to Ireland Ainsworth's email and IP addresses, including accounts that Jolly had allegedly used to harass and stalk his ex and her mother. As it turned out, there was no real evidence to suggest that Jolly had committed any of the acts he was accused of. But there was a growing stack of evidence indicating that Ireland Ainsworth had fabricated the entire case. When confronted by police, she reportedly confessed to setting up the fake social media accounts, and prosecutors dropped the charges against Jolly. Ireland Ainsworth was convicted of perverting justice and was hit with a 10-month jail sentence, along with a 10-year protective order in favor of the real victim, Louis Jolly. Number 7. Jennifer Annette Harley. On New Year's Eve in 2018, Jersey Shore star Ronnie Ortiz Magro reportedly got into a heated confrontation with his on-again, off-again girlfriend and child's mother, 32-year-old Jennifer Annette Harley, at a nightclub in Las Vegas, Nevada. Much to the surprise of everyone involved, the incident caught up with Harley 4 months later when she was picked up on an arrest warrant for misdemeanor domestic battery. Her lawyer, Michael Cristali, said his client denied committing any crimes. According to police, Harley called 911 to report a man with a gun. They discovered the warrant while responding to the call and took her into custody. She was freed on her own recognizance pending the outcome of the case, which Cristali said his client planned to fight. In the end, the case was ultimately dismissed. Either she was truly innocent or luck was on her side, considering that it was the second time since 2016 that she managed to slide out from under domestic charges. Harley found herself in legal hot water again just 2 years later when she was involved in another alleged domestic incident with her new boyfriend, Joseph Ambrosol. She was initially charged with felony assault with a deadly weapon and a misdemeanor count of battery, but the case was eventually dropped. While Harley has been accused of harming her partners multiple times, it appears as though none of the allegations ever seemed to stick, and in the eyes of the law, she's an innocent woman. Number 6. Christy Louise Jones. In 2022, a homeowner in Rowan County, North Carolina, encountered a real-life nightmare when he was awakened by a neighbor who said that someone was trying to set his house on fire. He grabbed a rifle and rushed outside, where he saw pieces of wood burning around a propane tank. The resident tried to put the flames out with a garden hose, only to discover that the arsonist had plugged their hose with sealant. The unlucky homeowner got a brief glimpse of the alleged culprit, who appeared to have one of his dogs in her possession. She fled the scene in her car before authorities arrived. At the home, responding deputies found bundles of wood and a jug of oil that the arsonist used to start the fire, along with damage they'd done to the victim's pool. Damages to the property were estimated at $20,000. Police later caught up with the suspect, who was identified as 49-year-old Christy Louise Jones. According to a report, she set the house on fire in an attempt to get revenge against her ex-boyfriend. However, she lit the wrong house ablaze, inadvertently targeting someone who had nothing to do with her failed relationship. There was no evidence that Jones and the homeowner knew each other, but a witness reported that the woman's ex-boyfriend owned property in the area. Jones was later charged with felony first-degree arson, assault with a deadly weapon, and animal theft. But according to the most recent reports from early 2023, she's since also been charged with attempted murder in connection with the case. She's currently behind bars under a bond of $100,000 while she awaits her next court date. Number 5. Tony Joe Silvey. 2 years after being broken up with by her ex-boyfriend, 62-year-old Peter Main, 49-year-old Tony Joe Silvey allegedly embarked on a relentless stalking campaign against him. Over a 3-month period, she called Main over 1,000 times, sent him more than 700 emails, shattered windows at his home in Houston, Texas with a tire iron and a 5-foot, 1.5-meter sword, and publicly blogged about their relationship. In her post, she admitted to being a scorned woman and voiced her anger about Main's new relationship with a younger woman. Silvey was also accused of egging Main's house on multiple occasions and posting the photos on Facebook, and at one point she called him more than 146 times over a 24-hour period. The pair parted ways in 2009, and for reasons that remain unclear, Silvey began harassing Main in 2011. In addition to the online torment and the alleged vandalism at his home, she also crashed into Main's parked car with her SUV, shoving it into his garage door, which caused an estimated $1,700 in damage to the house. Police reportedly warned Silvey to cool it, but the caution apparently fell on deaf ears. Main's house was egged again, and authorities arrested Silvey just days after issuing the warning. She was charged with felony stalking and was held at the Harris County Jail on $25,000 bail. The outcome of the case is unclear, but one can only hope that Silvey worked through her legal problems and moved on with her life. Number 4. Tracy Davies. Before dating apps existed, people met through something called the Lonely Hearts column, which was offered in many local newspapers. That's how Tracy Davies and Mark Coggill from Newcastle, England crossed paths in 2009. They hit it off and pursued a relationship, but while things seemed to be going well, Tracy was a recovering alcoholic, and when she and Mark bought 2 bottles of vodka to drink together before going out to a pub one night, it was undoubtedly a recipe for disaster. They were celebrating Mark's birthday, but Tracy was in a bad mood after finding out she wasn't pregnant. Her biological clock was ticking, and she really wanted a child, so she didn't handle the news very well. During their outing, she asked Mark for a kiss and bit his tongue. He thought it was a joke at first, but Tracy wouldn't let go, and she held her teeth down until the tip of his tongue came off. Afterwards, she spat the severed portion of it out onto the floor. Mark later said that Tracy made satisfied sounds as she bit his tongue. In his words, it sounded like if you have a cup of tea when you haven't had one for a few days, something that most British people would certainly understand. Tracy called an ambulance and admitted to biting off her lover's tongue. Sadly though, the severed portion couldn't be reattached due to fear of infection. To make things even more bizarre, Tracy was shocked when she got arrested for the crime. During her trial, the court heard about how she bit off a third of her ex-lover's tongue in an animal fashion. Tracy was ultimately sentenced to 3 years in prison for her needless actions. Number 3. Terrell Green. All hell broke loose outside an apartment building in Brandon, Florida in April 2022 when Hillsborough County deputies responded to a call about a crazed woman chasing her ex-boyfriend around with a gun. They arrived to find the panicked caller, who said that he was showering at his ex-girlfriend's apartment when she went through his phone and found something that sent her into a rage. The woman, identified as 39-year-old Terrell Green, allegedly pointed a gun at the man, threatened to kill him, and chased after him. He hopped a fence to escape from her and hid out at a nearby daycare where he called for help. Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Chronister later told the press that it was evident during the 911 call that the victim was in severe distress. He was out of breath and sounded like he was running for his life. Even after deputies arrived, Green reportedly continued to look for her ex-boyfriend. She showed up at the daycare in her car and allegedly charged toward a deputy with the vehicle. Thankfully though, he was able to get out of the way. The encounter ended when a nearby female deputy shot Green. According to the sheriff, she had no other choice. Green was taken to the hospital with an upper torso injury, but luckily, nobody else was wounded during the incident. In the end, authorities charged the suspect with aggravated assault with a firearm and false imprisonment. The outcome of the case, however, remains to be seen. Number 2. A tag team tackle. After being broken up with by her boyfriend in early 2020, a young Australian woman allegedly decided to seek revenge the old-fashioned way, with her fists. She recruited her friend, 20-year-old Lolita Hogan, to help, and they tracked their target down outside a grocery store in the city of Geelong. The ex-girlfriend charged at the victim and punched him in the back of the head as shocked bystanders looked on. Hogan then joined in, punching the victim and another woman who was trying to separate the parties. The two suspects then grabbed the woman by the head and swung her toward a wall. Naturally, the police got involved. During questioning, Hogan said that she helped her friend because she was angry about the pain that her ex had put her through. She pleaded guilty to a fray and managed to avoid a conviction, despite admitting to her involvement in the assault. Hogan received a 6-month good behavior bond, which meant that any record of the incident would be erased as long as she stayed out of trouble. But unfortunately, it's unclear whether the ex-girlfriend suffered any legal consequences. We have another great video lined up right after number 1. If you need more of a daily world list dosage, then be sure to stay tuned if you haven't seen that one yet. Number 1. CHRISTA and THISTLE. After 53-year-old CHRISTA Ann Thistle and her ex-boyfriend went their separate ways in 2021, he apparently took his time moving out of the RV they once shared in Oak Hill, Florida. Thistle decided to speed the process along during a heated argument and began moving the man's belongings out of the motorhome for him. During the disagreement, she allegedly knocked over some food that was being cooked and then picked up a locked pet crate that had her ex's cat Stanley inside and threw it into the nearby intracoastal waterway. The ex-boyfriend rushed into the water and retrieved the crate. Stanley was lucky to be alive and was undoubtedly traumatized after spending 20 seconds underwater. Thistle denied throwing the crate into the river, but failed to convince the authorities of her innocence, and so she was charged with animal cruelty and simple assault. According to authorities, she demanded to be taken to jail so she could make a phone call, bond out, and kill her ex-boyfriend. Police honored her wish and took her to the Volusia County Jail, where she was held on $5,000 bond. While the outcome of the case is unclear, one can only hope that Thistle calmed down during her time in lockup and that she made the rational decision to leave the past in the past.
17. ALIAH VESTAL and Savannah Walker. A young woman named Maya Tremillo was viciously beaten by at least 2 other girls in 2022 after being lured to a park in Clifton, Texas. ALIAH VESTAL, a woman who once considered herself Maya's best friend, allegedly asked Maya to return some shoes she'd borrowed. Maya thought it was an odd request, but came by with the footwear as promised. And as she approached ALIAH's car, a woman later identified as Savannah Walker rushed out of the vehicle and blindly attacked her. Maya tried walking away and was struck in the back of the head. As the suspects beat her, a third person filmed the fight and posted it on Snapchat. Footage of the brawl showed two girls pinning Maya to the ground and screaming at her. Someone found Maya in the park and took her to the hospital, where she was treated for a concussion, a sprained ankle, and multiple scratches. And in addition to her physical injuries, she was emotionally traumatized by the encounter. Maya's mother, Julie Cross, said that they'd called the police the night before to report Savannah Walker for threats and harassment, but they were told that there was nothing law enforcement could do to help because there wasn't enough evidence of a crime to act on the complaint. And surprise, surprise, the rivalry reportedly began over a boy and escalated from there. ALIAH and Savannah were charged with felony aggravated assault in retaliation, which can carry a sentence of up to 5 years if convicted. But at the moment, the current status and outcome of the case are unclear. 16. Logan Larrimore and Farren Lane. It should be common sense that if you're going to commit a crime, you shouldn't record it and you definitely shouldn't post it online. But two 18-year-old women named Logan Larrimore and Farren Lane apparently missed that memo when they decided to film themselves trespassing into a Myrtle Beach water park in 2017. In a series of Snapchat posts, the pair shared video of themselves scaling a fence to get into the Myrtle Waves water park at 4 a.m. They shared clips of themselves going down water slides, eating Italian ice they didn't pay for, and otherwise enjoying their illegal visit to the park without an apparent care in the world. However, someone shared the videos with the police, who quickly caught up with the gal pals and took them into custody on third-degree burglary charges. Larrimore and Lane weren't the first people to bust themselves for trespassing because they shared evidence of it on social media. In fact, it seems to happen alarmingly often and was even the focus of a TikTok challenge, daring people to walk into complete strangers' houses without knocking. This is extremely dangerous for obvious reasons, especially in US states with gun laws that allow homeowners to shoot intruders without legal consequences. Guns or no guns, you never know how crazy someone might be or how far they're willing to go to defend their home against someone they perceive as a threat. TikTok took swift action to remove videos that appeared to show individuals participating in the challenge, but people continue to do it anyway. And it blew up on Reddit, mostly for the sake of making fun of people who were dumb enough to participate. 15. Victoria Waldrip. Better known by her social media moniker, Whoa Vicky, teenage social media influencer Victoria Waldrip didn't get famous by being likable. In fact, the 23-year-old thrives on drama and controversy. But it works for some people, especially those who aren't picky about what kind of attention they receive. Whoa Vicky became an internet celebrity in 2017 when she got into a viral beef with Danielle Bregoli, otherwise known as Bad Baby, and most infamously known as the Cash Me Outside girl who challenged Dr. Phil to a fight on national television. As the world looked on and collectively rolled their eyes, the young women exchanged vicious rap disses toward one another. Their rivalry eventually petered out, but they've both remained popular on social media ever since. While guest starring on the We in Miami podcast in 2023, Whoa Vicky stirred the pot once again by accusing rapper Lil Nas X of pretending to be gay as a publicity move to expand his fan base. She went on to say that some of her friends knew the musician in high school and that he wasn't gay back then, and that she thinks he needs Jesus. Vicky further speculated that Lil Nas X is simply doing what's in at the moment to boost his popularity. Many people were understandably offended by the influencer's remarks, but Lil Nas X didn't pay much mind to Vicky's commentary, mostly because he realized it didn't deserve his energy. The fact that she accused someone of being fake and acting out of character to gain a following is almost laughable to some, especially those who remember Whoa Vicky's bizarre controversy over her race. During the early days of her internet fame, she often presented herself as an African American woman in her posts and videos. Many people doubted that it was true, mainly because she looks white, but also because it seemed like she tried too hard to behave in ways that mimic African American stereotypes. Woa Vicky stood by her claim, however, insisting that her ancestry results showed she was a quarter black. And at one point she shared a screenshot of the alleged results, which only added to the confusion by showing a 44% African ancestry, rather than the 25% she mentioned. It's unclear whether the image reflected her real results, but she was classified as white on an arrest report that was released after she allegedly kicked a cop at a mall in Georgia. It was also no secret that as far as Vicky's parents knew, nobody in their family had African ancestry. For many, this was enough to definitively clear up any confusion about Woa Vicky's race. But the situation became even more bizarre when she posted a video stating that she didn't think she was black after all. More than anything, it sounds like the young woman was suffering from an identity crisis of sorts, or perhaps just doing what she does best and acting outrageous to generate reactions and views from her audience. 14. Isaiah Craig Fitzgerald. During the early days of social media, society was shocked whenever an online rivalry spilled over into real-life violence. But today, it's nothing shocking because it happens all the time. And in all honesty, the pettiness that comes along with deadly social media feuds only seems to be reaching disturbing new heights with time. In 2023, a war of words erupted between teens in rural Missouri when 18-year-old Isaiah Craig Fitzgerald reacted to a photo of 20-year-old Tanner Watkins and his girlfriend with the laughing emoji. In the comments, Watkins asked, "What was so funny?" Then the situation quickly escalated into challenges between the parties to resolve the matter by fighting. The men agreed to settle the score at a local park. Fitzgerald brought along a female friend, while Watkins showed up with 18-year-old Caleb Ramsey. 2 carloads of people also arrived to watch the violent display, one in support of each side. But instead of duking it out in an old-fashioned fistfight, guns were involved and shots were fired from both vehicles. Fitzgerald was fatally struck in the face and several other people were injured, including the young woman he went to the park with, who was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. According to court documents, police swiftly responded to the sound of gunfire, and at the scene they found multiple guns. Ramsey and Watkins were charged with murder, 3 counts of assault, 4 counts of unlawful use of a weapon, and armed criminal action. But the outcome of their cases has yet to be decided. 13. Raymond Jalissant. When an off-duty New York City corrections officer named Dion Middleton felt something unusual hit his back while outside in the Bronx one morning in 2022, he reacted by pulling his gun and fatally shooting 18-year-old Raymond Jalissant. Middleton, who was 45 years old at the time of the incident, would later claim that he genuinely believed his life was in danger. He thought he was being struck by what felt like shards of glass and saw Jalissant sitting in the passenger seat of a nearby car. He explained that he thought he saw the teen making a threatening hand gesture before rolling up the car window, at which point he made the decision to shoot. By the time the police arrived, Middleton had fled the scene, and Jalissant was soon pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. Officers then tracked Middleton down at his job through surveillance footage and brought him in for questioning hours after the shooting. Inside the car Jalissant was riding in when he was shot, officers found a toy gun called a bead blaster, which was made for firing harmless gel pellets that are made from water. Being hit with the pellets might surprise someone, but it's not supposed to be painful like Middleton described, and he admitted he didn't hear gunshots before he decided to pull the trigger. News sources reported conflicting accounts of whether or not Middleton saw the toy gun in Jalissant's hands, but according to the New York Times, he admitted that he didn't see a weapon. Bead blasters are children's toys, but were being used by a lot of older teens and young adults at the time due to a TikTok trend that involved challenging people to shoot the beads at strangers. Some media outlets speculated that Jalissant was participating in the challenge when Middleton shot him. But the young man's sister, Jerida Esquian, told the New York Daily News that her brother was participating in a water gun fight to catch a break from the heat on a 90-degree summer day. And as a result of his needless actions, Middleton was suspended from his job without pay and charged with second-degree murder, first and second-degree manslaughter, and criminal possession of a weapon. If convicted of the most serious charge, he could face life in prison. But to this day, he maintains that he acted in self-defense. 12. Brandon Clark. Bianca Devins and Brandon Clark met on Instagram in 2019. They were intimate at times, but Devins didn't want a serious relationship with Clark and ultimately decided that she only wanted to be friends. But Clark secretly remained hopeful that Devins would start wanting more, even though she'd been perfectly clear about her wishes. Meanwhile, Devins hoped that Clark understood that she wasn't going to change her mind. 3 months after meeting, they attended a concert together in New York City, where they met up with a mutual friend named Alex. During the drive back to Utica, where Devins and Clark both lived, they got into an argument. Clark had seen Devins kissing Alex and was in a jealous rage. And at some point during the disagreement, Clark lost all self-control and brutally assaulted Devins with a knife. He cut her neck so badly that he nearly decapitated her and posted a photo of her mutilated body on Discord. In the caption, he made a reference to a practice called orbiting, which more or less translates to following someone obsessively online, sometimes to the point of stalking. After killing the young woman, Clark built a bonfire near his vehicle and listened to a depressing song repeatedly. He then placed numerous calls to family members to say farewell, prompting them to worry and dial 911. Discord users who saw his gruesome post also contacted authorities, and Clark eventually called the police on himself. And that's when he was arrested for second-degree murder. Sadly, the online post showing Devins' murdered body generated widespread praise for Clark from the incel community. The self-identifying term, which is short for involuntarily celibate, is used by men who typically struggle to land dates and find relationships, and who deeply hate women, especially those who they perceive as out of their league. Armed with an extreme and unwarranted sense of entitlement, this extreme version of toxic masculinity promotes the belief that women deserve to be punished for not giving an incel what he feels is owed, regardless of whether she wants it or not. Devins' family has had to fight continuously to get the horrifying images removed from websites and social media, forcing them to relive the trauma of her murder over and over, while misogynistic trolls ensure that the photos continue to circulate. Their experience sparked campaigns for Bianca's Law, which would require large social media platforms to take more responsibility for removing violent content from their site. And in 2022, New York Governor Kathy Hochul signed a version of the law that criminalizes posting, sharing, or publishing personal images with the intent to degrade or abuse someone under certain circumstances. After initially pleading not guilty, Brandon Clark changed his plea to guilty. He then tried to withdraw the guilty plea, but was denied since he'd already admitted to the crime. And in the end, the court sentenced him to 25 years to life in prison. 11. Chandler Halderson. Bart and CHRISTA Halderson enjoyed a typical upper-middle-class lifestyle in small-town America. They owned a nice house in Windsor, Wisconsin, and had 2 adult sons who seemed to be on the path to success. The couple didn't achieve their stable existence by being unreliable, so it was highly unusual when CHRISTA failed to show up at her job one day in 2021 without explanation. And after failing to reach her by phone, a co-worker stopped by the family's residence to check on her. The Haldersons' youngest son, 23-year-old Chandler, told the concerned colleague that his parents had gone to their cabin that was 3 hours away for the 4th of July weekend. But 3 days later, Bart and CHRISTA were still nowhere to be found. In a missing person report filed with the Dane County Sheriff's Department, Chandler claimed that his parents had been picked up and taken to the cabin by a couple he didn't recognize. But when law enforcement visited the cabin, it was immediately clear that nobody had been there for a very long time. Chandler was then brought in for additional questioning. Unaware that investigators had checked out the property, he claimed that his mom and dad went to the cabin to fix a plumbing emergency and that he helped pack tools they needed before they left. During the interview, deputies informed detectives that they had found mutilated human remains on a property where Chandler had been seen wandering prior to reporting his parents missing. And that's when Chandler realized that the deck was starting to stack against him. So he ended the interview and asked for a lawyer. The remains were identified as Bart Halderson, and Chandler was charged with murder while authorities continued to search for CHRISTA. Help came unexpectedly in the form of a tip from Chandler's girlfriend Catherine Melander, who'd recently been tracking his location on Snapchat. She'd noticed that he was in a remote area along the Wisconsin River and screenshotted it. And sure enough, CHRISTA's remains were found at the site, and Chandler was hit with another murder charge. During a search of the Haldersons' home, police also found the gun they believe was used to commit the murders, along with more than 200 bone fragments in the fireplace and evidence of blood that had been cleaned up. Prosecutors accused the young man of killing his parents because they found out that he'd flunked out of college. Chandler had gone to great lengths to convince his folks that he was still attending classes. He even sent them fake emails to make it look like he was still enrolled. He'd also lied about joining a police scuba diving team and other job prospects. During his trial, Assistant District Attorney Andrea Raymond described how Chandler enjoyed a privileged upbringing, which made it especially difficult to make sense of his actions. He also showed little to no emotion throughout the proceedings. After deliberating for just 2 hours, the jury found Chandler guilty of killing his parents. He was sentenced to life without parole, but said that he planned to appeal his conviction. During the hearing, he asked for any attorneys who were interested in taking his case to reach out. He also said that it's not that I do not have feelings, it's that I was warned to not show them in the scrutiny of this case. 10 deadly social media dares. Scores of young people have hurt themselves and even accidentally caused their own deaths in recent years while performing dangerous social media challenges. One of the latest ways people have needlessly put their lives on the line in a bid for online fame came in the form of the Malaikat Mount or Angel of Death challenge. The trend, which involved jumping in front of moving trucks in the hope that the driver would be able to brake without hitting the person, went viral in Indonesia in 2022. It doesn't take a big imagination to figure out how this went horribly wrong. In the city of Tangerang, 2 18-year-old women were mowed down by a truck that couldn't avoid hitting them, and they both died from fatal head injuries. Police then caught and detained at least 14 more people that day for attempting the stunt. Just 2 days earlier, in the city of Bandung, a truck hit one of 2 teenage boys who jumped out in front of it. But by the grace of God, the young man survived with serious injuries, including a fractured skull and shattered teeth. While this was the first time the trend was mentioned in many news sources, it first appeared on social media at least a year earlier. In one of the early tragedies that came with the challenge, a truck plowed into a group of 8 people in 2021, striking 3 of them. 1 teenager died, while the other 2 were seriously injured. These are just a few examples of the many bad outcomes resulting from clout chasers doing dangerous things to boost their popularity on social media. And these stunts are often successful at achieving viral status, making it difficult to talk young people out of taking potentially fatal risks. Just weeks before the Angel of Death challenge made international news in 2022, the death of an 18-year-old Florida man named Timothy Isaiah Hall, better known as Timbo the Redneck, died while filming a video for social media. With more than 200,000 followers, Hall had already achieved influencer status when he crashed his truck while doing donuts in a friend's front yard for a TikTok video. Hall lost control of the truck in the middle of doing burnouts, causing the vehicle to flip and throwing him out of the vehicle. He landed on the ground and the truck landed on top of him, ultimately crushing him to death. There's no denying that Hall's dangerous driving helped to attract the kind of fame many people hope to achieve, but he paid for it with his life. 9. Screen-addicted teen slaughters dad. 51-year-old Anuad Chaubangdwe was at his wit's end when he asked his son, Pamurad, to take a break from playing video games one day in 2019. Ever since the teen was kicked out of school due to his chronic absences, he did nothing but sleep all day and spent every waking moment playing video games at the family's home in southern Thailand. But his lifestyle quickly became a major source of conflict for the household. Within moments of his father's request to put the controller down, Pamwarat grabbed a knife and stabbed Anuat in the back, and afterwards he fled the scene on his bicycle. Responding officers arrived at the home in Surat Thani to find the victim, a retired police sergeant, on the floor in a pool of blood. A trail of blood from the yard to the kitchen showed that the victim spent his final moments crawling inside in a desperate attempt to get help. Police tracked Pamwarat down at a restaurant, where they found him playing video games with a friend, and took him into custody on suspicion of murder. According to relatives, the young man's obsession caused him to skip school for days at a time, and getting expelled and having even more free time on his hands apparently only made the situation worse. Sadly, his unwillingness to step away from the TV screen for even just a few minutes and his impulsive anger toward his dad landed him in a place where basic comforts are scarce and video games are definitely not allowed. 8. Kiara McCulley. In a horrifying act of violence that was equal parts bizarre and cruel, someone killed and tried to decapitate a 21-year-old woman named Grace Jennings at her home in Santa Fe, New Mexico in October 2022. Responding officers visited the residence in response to a call about a possible homicide and found Jennings' mutilated remains in a detached garage. And laying near her body was a bloody 3-foot-long sword. According to a criminal complaint, 25-year-old Isaac Apodancia made the 911 call after he told his mother that he saw his girlfriend killing a woman. And when officers arrived, they saw 19-year-old Kiara McCulley running inside the house and slamming the door shut behind her. Apodancia and McCulley were taken in for questioning and revealed that they'd shared a bed with the victim the night before. They also both claimed to have been romantically involved with Jennings in the past. McCulley told police that she got upset with Jennings for failing to intervene while she was assaulted by several men. She also said she saw Jennings collecting money during the incident. The Santa Fe Police Department confirmed to local media that an assault report was filed in 2020, but that the details it contained were vastly different from the story McCulley told after Jennings' murder. At one point during the interview, she mentioned having mental health issues and claimed not to remember what had happened. But she also allegedly said that she was partially hopeful that Jennings was dead and admitted to fantasizing about killing the victim on multiple occasions, which only furthered law enforcement's growing suspicion of her involvement. Meanwhile, in another interrogation room, Apodancia flatly denied any involvement in Jennings' death. Instead, he pointed the finger exclusively at McCulley, claiming that she'd been planning to kill the victim for 2 years. A search of his text messages strongly indicated that he was both aware of and involved in the plot to kill Jennings. It even appeared as though Apodancia pressured McCulley to follow through with the murder. Both suspects were charged with first-degree murder in connection with the case. However, McCulley was initially found incompetent to stand trial, but after undergoing several months of mental health treatment, she was declared competent. And at the moment, her case is slated to go to trial sometime in August of 2023, with Apodancia to be tried separately at a later date. 7. MYSHAWN Stanley. 21-year-old ALIAH Stanley and her brother, 22-year-old MYSHAWN, were hardly the first pair of siblings to fight over the family television. They were hanging out at a relative's home in Cleveland, Ohio one day in 2023 when they began arguing because ALIAH wanted to watch a show and MYSHAWN wanted to play Fortnite. What started out as a seemingly ordinary spat between siblings ended with ALIAH being shot more than 6 times. She was still alive when officers arrived at the scene, but sadly she died soon after. The siblings' aunt, Tasha Lett, told local station WCPO that MYSHAWN has violent and aggressive tendencies and that he jumped on his sister and began wrestling with her during the disagreement. Lett said that ALIAH initially got away from MYSHAWN and was heading upstairs to get away from him, but she was unaware that he had a gun and she was shot from behind. After shooting ALIAH once, MYSHAWN allegedly fired 6 more bullets into her body before fleeing the house. Other relatives echoed the aunt's sentiments about MYSHAWN having severe anger issues and said that he suffers from bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. They weren't surprised that he was capable of hurting someone, but they were shocked and devastated that his sister ended up being that person. A SWAT team arrested MYSHAWN on suspicion of murder the day after the shooting, and at the moment he's being held on a $500,000 bond while he awaits his next court date. 6. A lethal thrill. Bored young people are sometimes known to pass the time in strange, destructive, and even deadly ways. And this was certainly the case for a trio of 18-year-olds from Colorado who killed an innocent driver during their reckless pursuit for a thrill. 20-year-old Alexa Bartel was talking to a friend on the phone while driving in Jefferson County one night in April 2023 when suddenly the call disconnected. Concerned for her safety, the friend shrank to Alexa's location and drove to the scene. She found the young woman's vehicle crashed in a field with the windshield shattered and Alexa motionless behind the wheel with a fatal head injury. Law enforcement concluded that a large landscaping boulder had been deliberately thrown at her car and that it was the rock and not the impact of the car crash that killed the victim. The tragedy came following a string of similar incidents that happened throughout the night, leaving 7 cars damaged and 2 drivers with minor injuries. Further investigation revealed that rocks had been thrown at cars in the area on multiple previous occasions over a 2-month period leading up to Alexa's death. Using a technique called geofencing, detectives used cell phone data to look for phone numbers that showed a pattern of being in close proximity to the rock-throwing incidents. And based on their findings and tips from the public, they identified the suspects as Nicholas Mitch Carroll Chick, Joseph Koenig, and Zachary Quack. One tipster, who said that he'd been hanging out with the group earlier that night, said that Joseph Koenig frequently participates in destructive behavior and likes causing chaos. He told sheriff's deputies that he asked to be taken home when he saw his friends loading the bed of Koenig's truck with rocks from a Walmart parking lot because he just knew that something bad was going to happen. Koenig failed to talk with law enforcement after his arrest, but Carol Chick reportedly admitted to participating in similar behavior on at least 10 occasions. According to police, he said that all 3 of the suspects got excited when they hit cars. However, he and Quack gave conflicting stories about who threw the rock that killed Alexa. But after striking Alex's car, Quack snapped a photo of her vehicle as a memento. The young men each face charges of first-degree murder, first-degree attempted murder, second-degree assault, and attempted second-degree assault. But we'll have to wait and see what sentence they receive. 5. Jose DIAZ-CONTRENAS. During the pre-dawn hours one morning in May 2023, Baltimore County Police responded to a reported shooting at a Motel 6 in Kansville, Maryland. Guests would later tell local station WBAL-TV that they awoke to the sound of multiple gunshots. One witness went into the hallway to investigate and was startled to find 2 victims on the floor. 30-year-old Javier Argueta died at the scene, and 2 other victims aged 19 and 25 were taken to the hospital with none life-threatening injuries. Investigators initially declined to specify what they believe led up to the shooting, but they reassured the public that it was most likely an isolated incident and didn't appear to be a random act. According to charging documents obtained by WBAL, responding officers found 18-year-old Jose DIAZ-CONTRENAS wandering around in the motel parking lot. Surveillance footage appeared to show the young man pulling a handgun from beneath his coat and firing several rounds. DIAZ-CONTRENAS allegedly admitted to committing the shooting during questioning, telling investigators that he couldn't stop. He was booked on charges of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder, and is being held without bail as he awaits his next court date in June 2023. And, unfortunately, authorities are still working to establish a motive for the senseless crime. 4. Cameron Robbins. After graduating from high school in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 2023, 18-year-old Cameron Robbins celebrated by traveling to the Bahamas with his classmates. During a sunset cruise, the star baseball player took his peers up on a dare to jump off the ship. Bystander footage showed someone throwing the young man a life preserver while his peers shouted at him to grab on. However, he seemed distracted by a shadowy shape in the water and appeared to be trying to swim away from it when he suddenly vanished beneath the surface. It was dark and the footage is blurry, but many people who have watched it believe it shows Robbins trying to escape from a shark. And this wouldn't be surprising, since the waters where he jumped in are known to be heavily shark-infested. The boat's crew members looked for Robbins but couldn't find him, so they called for help. Multiple agencies then participated in a search for the teen, including the US Coast Guard. But not a single trace of him turned up, and the effort was called off after a few days. Robbins was presumed dead, and authorities extended their condolences to his family. And without a body, the nature of his death remains unclear. It's hard to explain what possesses people to do things that are obviously dangerous in response to a dare or challenge, but in hindsight, many, if not most people, have done at least one or two things that seem incredibly reckless. 3. Madeline Davis. 21-year-old Madeline Davis wanted to see the world while she was still young. So, after visiting Thailand and Bali in 2019, the British beautician headed to Australia. She was having the time of her life with a group of friends when tragedy struck at the most unexpected moment. After pulling an all-nighter at a house party, Madeline and several others went to watch the sunrise over Diamond Bay in Sydney. Everyone got so caught up in taking photos that they somehow failed to notice when the young woman fell off a 262-foot-high cliff. When they finally realized Madeline was missing, they contacted authorities, who found her body wedged in a rock shelf 55 feet underwater. An autopsy revealed that her blood alcohol content was twice the legal limit for driving. She also had amphetamines, cocaine, ketamine, and MDMA in her system. Everyone in the group was heavily intoxicated, which explains why it took them so long to realize that Madeline was no longer with them. The coroner concluded that her death was the result of a tragic accident and that nobody else was at fault for it. And according to an official report, she climbed over a fence into an unauthorized area before she fell. Madeline wasn't the first person to suffer a horrific accident at the site, which is popular among tourists for its scenic beauty. Over the years, the fences and danger signs have gotten taller and bigger in hopes that more people will heed their caution. But visitors continue to ignore the warnings and, unfortunately, pay for it with their lives. 2. Katrina Lee. In a bizarre display that she later described as Gen Z humor, 20-year-old Katrina Lee allegedly threatened to shoot up a mental hospital in Green Bay, Wisconsin in January 2023. Employees at the hospital got police involved after someone alerted them to the threats, which appeared online and on Snapchat. According to police, Lee knew a patient at the facility. A screenshot of one of the alleged threats stated that there'd no longer be a hospital soon because she was about to shoot it up. The person who wrote the statement said that they'd failed to get in touch with the patient after calling multiple times and that the hospital had been pissing them off all morning. At the time the threats were made, police were unsure of whether the suspect had access to any weapons. So they tracked the post to Lee's address and paid her a visit. Lee reportedly admitted to making the threats, but said that she had no plans to act on her words. She further explained that she was at her wits' end with the hospital's poor communication and the inferior quality of the food and doctors there. During the conversation with law enforcement, Lee reiterated that she wasn't going to act on her threats and that it was just Gen Z humor. But she was nevertheless booked on one count of misdemeanor disorderly conduct and one felony count of making terroristic threats. If convicted of the felony charge, she could face up to 3.5 years in prison, while the disorderly conduct charge carries a sentence of up to 90 days in jail. 1. Alexander Barrow. Nobody knows why 23-year-old Alexander Frank Barrow drove 1,700 miles to kill a young gamer he didn't personally know in 2020. He'd met 18-year-old Matthew Thane online, but no logical reason to travel from the greater San Francisco area to the Dallas-Fort Worth suburb of Flower Mound. There was also no obvious motive for Barrow to lure the avid Call of Duty player outside and shoot him. According to police, a helmet-clad Barrow approached the property with a propane tank at around 6 a.m. and lit it on fire. He waited for Thane to exit the house, fatally shot the young man, then got back into his vehicle and drove straight back to California. And in less than 72 hours after leaving for Texas, he was back home. When Barrow didn't answer the door for law enforcement when they showed up at his residence with a search warrant, police broke into his apartment and found him dead. Lacking any other explanation for the bizarre tragedy, investigators concluded that the incident may have stemmed from a video game-related disagreement.
Would you rather live a few buildings down from an ex that you're on civil terms with but would rather not cross paths with, or be harassed incessantly over the internet by a crazy ex who lives thousands of miles away? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!